StreamYard to get it to go. We're live on YouTube. And then I just got to click over and it takes a second. And now we're live on Instagram on a little bit of a delay. All right, guys, welcome aboard. Welcome back. Appreciate it. They will be live on here, Jason. So, the comment section, I'll try to pay attention to any comments that come in. Anyway, this is Jason Dotson, fellas, and he is the head research scientist for the state of Florida, the FWC. What does FWC stand for, Jason?
FWC is the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, and I'm part of the Fish and Wildlife Research Institute. So we have many divisions in FWC, and we are pretty unique in the state of Florida that we have a research institute, which is a division that solely focuses on research and generating information to help inform management. So we operate in collaboration with management divisions, but ultimately FWRI doesn't make policy decisions. We provide information to our management decisions that take management actions and make policy decisions. So it's a pretty unique setup that works pretty well here in Florida.
That is pretty unique. I guess before we get started too deep into that, what is your background? We got a lot of kids that follow along. When did you learn that you could become a fish scientist, and where did you go to school?
I didn't even know that fisheries biology was a career path until I was already in college. And, I always find it so interesting talking to other biologists and hearing their career path, because it's one that usually has a lot of winding roads. It's not necessarily your traditional, want to be a doctor or a police officer when I grow up, and the pathway to get there. So I'm from Virginia, Northern Virginia, right outside of DC, Manassas. Grew up on a lake, Lake Jackson, in Manassas, and just loved fishing. I mean, from the time I could walk, my dad and my grandpa took me out fishing and was just obsessed with it. And coincidentally, I went to Virginia Tech to do my undergrad, and didn't even know it was a school that had a fisheries program. Not every college has a fisheries program. It's sort of a select few colleges that even have fisheries science as a focused field of study. And I just coincidentally landed there, and I started out as a finance major and didn't find it all that interesting. And my mom worked with a guy whose brother was a fisheries biologist in North Carolina. And she said, you should look into switching your major. I was like, oh, I didn't know that was a thing. Fish for a living? Because that's what I thought it meant.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, me too. Boy, was I wrong about that.
Yeah. So yeah, I switched my major and just fell in love with it. I was passionate about it and interested, which I was not in finance. And
right.
Then I ultimately came to University of Florida, and I got my master's here, and I've been with FWC since 2007, right after I finished my master's degree at University of Florida.
Cool. What was your research project on, your thesis on?
So my thesis was looking at the impacts of recreational and commercial bycatch of black crappie on the Harris Chain of Lakes. So on the Harris Chain of Lakes, there is a gillnet program to harvest gizzard shad that is operated by the St. Johns River Water Management District. And this has been going on for over 20 years on Lake Apopka. And it's an effort to reduce phosphorus in the lakes. Those are impaired water bodies with high phosphorus levels, and removing gizzard shad can remove some phosphorus from the system. And that program had expanded to Lake Griffin, and there was maybe potential expansions beyond that. And so my research was on Lake Dora. And so there was a 1-year commercial fishing operation on Lake Dora, which we monitored the bycatch for and evaluated the mortality rates of not only the commercial bycatch, but also the recreational harvest. And we did that through the use of high reward tags. So we put, many anglers in Florida might have seen these tags before in the backs of a fish, usually a yellow tag about 4 inches long. We call them dart tags. They look like a little dart coming out. It'll have information on it. And what we use those for is those tags represent a subsample of the population, and we have a known number of those animals out there carrying that tag. And when an angler catches one, they're incentivized to report it to us because we pay typically $100 is what we typically pay for those reward tags. And there's been a lot of research done trying to get at what is that number that can ensure close to 100% reporting rate. And so if we have 500 tags out there and 250 of them get caught, then that would be roughly 50% catch rate. And then we ask the anglers, did you harvest the fish? And, if all of them were harvested, then you'd have a 50% fishing mortality rate. And when you have your fishing mortality rate, and we had information on growth rates and natural mortality rates, then we can do some population modeling to look at long-term impacts of fishing. And what we ultimately found on Lake Dora was that the recreational mortality at that time, this was in 2004 through 2006, that was a booming crappie fishery at that time with a high effort. At that time, recreational fishing mortality was pretty high. About 35% of the population annually was harvested. And then the commercial bycatch mortality was not significant. However, when you combined it with the high levels of recreational mortality that was going on, it did represent a possibility for overfishing on that system. And commercial fishing did not go on long-term on Lake Dora. But on Lake Apopka, it still goes on to this day, the gillnet fishery for gizzard shad. And Lake Apopka has never had the level of crappie fishing effort or harvest that Lake Dora does. So the little bit of bycatch that does occur from the gillnets doesn't represent a population concern on Apopka.
That's interesting.
The big bass guy obsessed with big bass did research on crappie, and I pulled a lot of gillnets full of gizzard shad, and affectionately known as stank shad.
Right. Yeah. I find it interesting that you can change the phosphorus levels by removing the shad. I never knew that.
Yeah, it's difficult to have meaningful impacts where you actually see major changes in the water chemistry. Although it has been achieved in Florida, there was a small lake called Lake Denham that's part of the Harris chain of lakes, and that was sort of the proof of concept for this project. It's called biomanipulation.
Yeah.
It's more common in European lakes where the trophic levels aren't as high. Our trophic levels are so high in Florida. We are naturally phosphorus rich to begin with.
Right.
It's just very difficult to have success through biomanipulation. But on Lake Denham, it was fished hard enough to remove, I can't remember exactly, but there is a publication on it for anybody who's interested in looking it up. I want to say that greater than 90% of the estimated population of gizzard shad was removed on Lake Denham. And when they fished them that hard, there was a meaningful positive impact for water quality. But they've never been fished that hard on Lake Apopka, or Lake George has been fished in the past. Noonan's Lake has been fished in the past. It'd be very difficult to fish them that hard on lakes that size. And especially the gillnets that were used were restricted to a minimum of 4-inch mesh. And that was to reduce bycatch.
Sure.
So in order to reduce that bycatch, you're also reducing your target catch, your size selecting for the larger shad. And so you're never going to catch all the smaller shad. And so it's hard to fish them down low enough.
Right. Well, that makes sense.
Yeah. But, these lakes have a nutrient budget. The DEP has like a nutrient budget and target levels for phosphorus, and there's lots of different management strategies that they employ to try and reduce impaired waterways. And removal of gizzard shad is just it's another tool in the toolbox that can remove a little bit of the excess phosphorus, but it's not a magic bullet that can really clear up a lake dramatically.
No, that's incredibly hard to do even in a pond. There's once you get phosphorus levels too high, you're in a world of hurt, really. It's hard to manage. That's really interesting. I took a field trip down to the fish hatchery in Webster, and that was an interesting place. I've got a ton of information from that. How many bass are they growing down there? I forget off the top of my head, but they had all the stocking charts of where they put the bass. And one thing that popped out at me while I was down there was, how you guys are monitoring like the northern strain fish and where that's popping up in genetic, in your genetic. I wanted to touch on that, how you guys do that as well. We got a lot of talk about genetics, but from my perspective, it's kind of been the inverse. You guys are trying to protect the Florida fish and maintain the Florida genetics here and not have that intrusion of northern strain, where anywhere in Georgia, the more Florida fish, the better, really, the way they feel about it up that way.
Georgia, Texas, California, everywhere wants the Florida bass. And yeah, we have a big responsibility in Florida to protect and conserve the genetics of those Florida bass.
Yeah, really do.
Yeah. So the number, you asked about how many fish are stocked. So that's the Florida Bass Conservation Center in Webster, which is open to the public, and anybody can go tour it. It's a great facility. It's got a lot of educational components to it. So each year, our regional fisheries biologists submit stocking requests to the fish hatcheries based on the needs of the water bodies in their region, which ultimately informs how many bass we might stock in a given year. So that number is variable. You can actually go on our website and look at all the history of the records, and they actually grow quite a bit more than bass there. They grow hybrid striped bass, bluegills, golden shiners, tried to get into rear and chub suckers. That's been difficult to do, but some research there on that. Channel catfish. We have a lot of community-based fishing ponds around the state of Florida in highly urbanized areas that we stock with catchable size catfish that people can catch right from the bank. Family-based fishing from the bank, catchable size fish going right in. So they raise a lot of different things at the fish hatchery there. And we have another fish hatchery up in Blackwater. It's called the Blackwater Fisheries and Research Development Center. So those are our two state fish hatcheries. And really, if everything is going right out there, we actually don't have to stock bass very often or ever. If the habitat's right, water quality, forage, if everything's going well, we don't need to stock fish. What we often do in stocking is supplemental to augment populations that are suppressed, usually from poor habitat conditions where they're getting poor recruitment from natural year classes.
Mm-hmm.
We have some success stories where stocking has been highly successful in contributing to year classes that failed, like wild year classes that failed or were very limited. But in many cases, we don't get the returns that people might imagine. It's interesting. We have a social science group that's part of the Institute as well. We've done a number of surveys of anglers and stakeholders. And one common theme that's popped out across 3 or 4 different surveys that we've done is that anglers tend to grossly overestimate the number of water bodies that we stock around the state and how frequently they catch stocked fish. because it's actually a very, very small percentage. I mean, Florida's got 8,000 lakes. You know, we stock a handful each year. So
Right.
it's not like we're stocking every lake every year. We'd have to have a lot more hatcheries.
Yeah. Yeah. I would, I've seen that. I've seen like a kind of a disconnect between even what people think is possible, you know, to even think that you could stock 8,000 lakes every single year. You know, that's just not even a feasible. The amount of water that you guys have to manage around here is just incredible, versus the amount of manpower. It's just, to me, it looks overwhelming. The amount of water and work that is in this area. I've just been living here for a few years, but it is certainly a lake around every corner, a pond. You know, it's an amazing. So what would be the process of determining like where that northern bass genetics is encroaching? How are you guys doing those collections and that genetic testing?
Yeah, so we screen populations to determine if they're pure Florida or the percentage of northern alleles that might exist, and most of our populations are pure Florida or very, very high percentage of Florida bass. And so we go out and we'll electrofish lakes, and we have a geneticist. We have a genetics program with multiple geneticists in St. Petersburg, where our headquarters is. Very talented lead geneticist down there that has developed microsatellite markers to determine Florida bass, differentiate Florida bass versus northern bass. There's lots of different genetic techniques out there, and I'm not a geneticist by any means. But we're pretty advanced with our genetics program. Not a lot of states have their own genetics program. It's pretty important for Florida to have. So we have our geneticist in St. Petersburg, and they assess population levels. So to authenticate, we call it a population. We typically are looking at a minimum of 370 fish in that population, randomly selected, and looking for those to be pure. And our determination or threshold for a pure Florida bass is 98.5% based on his 15 microsatellite markers. And then we also look at individual fish. So we collect brood fish for the hatchery from the wild. All those fish that are collected in the wild, a fin clip or a tissue sample is sent down to our genetics lab, and it has to be authenticated as a pure Florida bass in order to breed in our hatchery, to stock back out into wild lakes. And so each fish gets a pit tag where it gets, like a chip. It's got a unique identifier, so we know which each fish is. So we have to pull any out. We know which ones to pull out if they're not pure Florida bass. But yeah, every single brood fish that goes through the hatchery gets authenticated as a pure Florida bass, and that is done at our genetics lab down in St. Petersburg.
That's cool. Big Malone has a question, and I want to tie that in. He's asking about your the biggest bass you guys have electrofished up and what your PB is. But I wanted to tie that back into just the basic. I've heard there's a lot of genetics talk going around on the internet. People putting a lot of limitations on a northern bass. What is your thoughts like on what the maximum growth rate for a northern bass versus we know Florida bass can get huge, but what do you think the maximum growth rate from your knowledge on what northern bass can achieve?
So based on what I have seen around the country and folks that I've talked to around the country, I think the top end for a northern bass is right around 13 pounds, a pure northern. I look at places like Texas and California and what their state records were before Florida bass were entered there. I think there was a 12 something caught in New York this past year. That was a pure largemouth bass. There's a 15-pound state record for Massachusetts.
I saw that. Yeah, I was wondering. I was going to ask about that.
You know, if that was a pure northern, or now we don't call them northern anymore. That's a whole
right,
those
right.
are large, so a largemouth bass, what most of us are used to calling northerns. If that was a pure largemouth bass, that's the biggest one that I know of.
Yeah. I thought too, I was thinking probably a teener fish, certainly over 10 pounds, but I've heard chatter, suddenly now that I've heard that northern fish don't get over 6 pounds. They don't get over 8 pounds. It's like, oh, come on, guys. I've got a northern fish and Florida fish in the same pond. And our northern fish right now, some of them are over 5 pounds in just a couple of years. So I've seen that personally. I've seen some northern strain fish go to 8. I know they get bigger than that.
Well, I'll tie this into the question. If I move here and look behind me, so all these fish on this old barn door mount, those were caught in the late 90s in Virginia. I grew up in Virginia, and those are all between 8 and 10 pounds, and those are largemouth bass.
Yeah.
So yeah, they can absolutely get to 8 to 10 pounds. And
sure.
Over 10-pound pure largemouth bass is a rare animal.
Yes.
Really big one, but yeah, they can get up to 13 pounds, just very, very rarely.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's really not too common for any fish to be over 10 pounds, I don't think. It's a rare animal, no matter where you are on the planet. Certainly should be treated with some respect.
For sure.
Handled properly. We talk a lot about proper fish handling and get some blowback on that. What are your thoughts about handling fish?
Well, yeah, this is this is actually like one of my pretty big pet peeves with bass anglers, which I am a hardcore bass angler, and I love it, and I'm super passionate about it. And I see all these, not all these, but so I see guys out there and the misinformation and myths, that maybe we can work on to try and bust, like,
yeah,
you catch a giant bass and it's going to be better off in my live well all day recovering, and then I'll release it at the end of the day. That's not right.
No.
It's not accurate. The best thing that you can do is keep that fish wet. Don't keep it out of the water for more than 30 seconds. Take your picture quick and release that fish right away. And especially don't haul around a bunch of fish in your live well all day. I see these guys that like to get, my best 5, like a tournament guy would be, but not fishing a tournament, and holding all those fish, maybe holding 30 pounds of fish in a live well all day.
Mm-hmm.
We know that that's going to cause some delayed mortality. Just because the fish is alive when you release it and you feel good about it in the moment, that doesn't mean that fish is going to survive long term, because there's a delayed mortality associated with the handling stress that fish has gone through. And so we have some great rules of thumb on our trophy catch page. And we actually have, it's called Trophy Care, which is a component of Trophy Catch that has all of our best fish handling practices and recommendations. If people want to go check that out.
I need to write that down. I'm going to steal some information off that, make posts about that. That's a pet peeve of mine as well. I made a comment on a pretty popular page. There was a guy tanking bass like that, and I was like, that doesn't look like you have a big enough tank to have 60 pounds of bass in. And just tried to break down it's just physics, they require oxygen. And when you put that many fish in that small amount of water, the water just can't hold enough oxygen. They're suffocating in there, even though their aerator is running. And I think, like you said, guys aren't doing it on purpose, certainly, but just that doesn't mean their fish aren't going to die either, and I got a ton of blowback on that, but I'm going to stand firm. Sometimes the groupthink is killing our best fish. Like we just said, those 10-pound fish are super rare. Now you want to tank them and oxygen deprive them and stress them out with ammonia and everything else because you're not handling them properly.
In the state of Florida, it's not even legal
Good.
Possession. If you have a fish in your live well, that's possession and considered harvest. And so if you get checked by a game warden and you're fishing by yourself with more than 2 fish greater than 16 inches, you're in violation of our statewide harvest regulations.
Good.
And, a lot of people think, well, if I'm going to release that fish later in the day, it doesn't count as harvest, and so I can keep as many as I want in my live wells, and that's not actually the case. Once it's in your live well, that's considered a harvested fish.
Mm-hmm.
How many guys do you know out in the Gulf that would hold multiple redfish in their live wells all day and tell the warden, oh, I was going to release those later?
Right. No. And that's the way it should be. And I'd like to see more, just more education around that. I think, especially as the tournaments get bigger and the fishing pressure gets harder, these big, massive fleets of 200, 300, 400 boats going out consistently is going to be tanking more of the larger fish. It's going to be adding more and more of what you said, that delayed mortality, that kind of that mortality you really don't, it's sneaky because you don't see those fish dead. They get caught by, especially around here. I bet the alligators get them. They get slow and lethargic, and the snapping turtles and alligators and all the other predators get them before you ever see them die, I imagine.
So we just completed a multi-year study across the state where we worked with multiple different tournaments to assess delayed mortality out to 10 days. And I think what we found would shock many tournament anglers, because that delayed mortality was near 50%.
Wow.
I think it was like 47% on average. Some tournaments were as high as 70% for an individual tournament. So, Florida's hot in the summertime, and the hotter the water gets, the more oxygen demand there is, the more opportunity there is for bacterial infections, from fish handling, where the hook is for, an infection to set in later and cause that delayed mortality. So just imagine if half of all the tournament caught fish were thrown back in the water dead immediately, and what people would think about that. But it's because it happens delayed over time, over the course of 10 days. Some swim off to different areas, die in different areas. It's not all seen at one time, so it's a little bit out of sight, out of mind. But the reality is, it's no different.
No, it's not.
Fish are dying.
Yeah, and it has to be taken into account, and especially like you said, whether it's tanking that large fish all day long to make a picture, or it's tanking that fish all day long to take it back to a weigh-in, it's still spending its day in a tank. And if you consistently do that, I don't care how good you are, you can handle it perfectly. Just the simple fact of putting it in a tank is putting stress on the fish. There's got to be a point at where, even if it's handled perfectly, there's got to be a point, probably like three trips, I would guess, 4 trips into a tank in a season. It's going to die just from the handling stress of being put in tanks so much.
Yeah, I mean, the best thing you can do is well, here's another little bit of a pet peeve, is this new trend of boat flipping biggins.
Yeah, man, I'm with you on that.
10-pound bass boat flipped. I've seen 13-pound bass boat flipped, and that's one of the worst things you could do for a fish of that size, and a fish that's that special. So yeah, I mean, use a landing net, or even better than a landing net is just to land it with your hands boat side. Don't keep it out of the water more than 30 seconds. Take quick pictures. Don't put it on the carpet of your boat. Wet any surfaces that you put that fish on. If you're going to measure it on a measuring board, wet that measuring board. Keep that fish wet and get it back in the water as fast as you can.
All excellent information. Really appreciate you going over that again. I'm looking here. I pulled up on the on your website here the Florida Trophy Bass topics, and man, you got some cool stuff that we've touched on here. Special trophy bass regulations, non-lethal aging jumps out at me. Rainbow trout research jumps out at me. Trub sucker research jumps out at me. And let's just start at the bottom with the Trophy Catch Citizen Science Program. What is that?
Yeah, so Trophy Catch is a citizen science program that helps us document how many trophy bass are caught around the state, and it can give us really valuable information about what's going on in so many different lakes across the state and help inform research and management actions in the future. Like we talked about earlier, there's 8,000 lakes out there, and between my group in freshwater fisheries research and then our freshwater fisheries management division, collectively, we've got a little over 100 biologists for 8,000 lakes. And that's a very big number of freshwater fisheries biologists relative to other states, but water. And so we sample, on average, about 150 bass a year, electrofishing greater than 8 pounds. Through our Trophy Catch program, we get about 1,500 submissions annually. So it's 10 times the amount of information that we get by pooling all of our anglers into citizen science and reporting that information back to us. And so it's a way for anglers to engage in conservation. It's pretty easy to participate. We have a website at trophycatch.com where you can register. And when you catch a fish greater than 8 pounds, you just got to take a picture of it on the scales. We call it the scale to tail shot, the entire fish in the photo with the weight clearly visible. And then you upload that fish to the website. And we have 3 different categories of catches, an 8 to 10 pound club, a 10 to 13 pound club, and then the most exclusive, our Hall of Fame club, is 13 plus pounds. And we have different prizes and awards for each club level. Bass Pro Shops is our biggest sponsor. Every category gets Bass Pro Shop gift cards, but if you catch a Hall of Fame fish, you get a free replica mount. And we have an award ceremony annually where we give those replica mounts out. The program has helped inform quite a bit of research projects and management initiatives over the years. And then I'll tie back in with that earlier question. I never said my PB. So
yeah, that's right.
My Florida PB is 13.9, which was submitted into the Trophy Catch program 3 years ago. And that's the only bass in Florida that I've caught over 13 pounds.
Wow.
I did catch a 14.4 in Mississippi back in 2006, and that's the one mounted up there that you can barely see. But yeah, 13.9 is my biggest in Florida, and it was registered into the Trophy Catch program. But I don't get a free mount or any of the prizes or anything.
Well, that's cool though. I mean, so people can get prizes. Aren't there like boat giveaways and stuff for some of that?
So just for registering into the program, you're automatically entered into a lottery for a brand new Phoenix bass boat powered by Mercury with power poles. I mean, it's a fully decked out.
Yeah, it's a set up deal, man, and it's a cool program. I keep an eye on that. That people constantly, sending their catches in, getting recognized, and helping collect, helping the science collect data. So, I mean, it's a win-win all the way around. Like those tags that are $100 a piece. I need to catch a mess of those.
Yeah. So we have, I mentioned we sample about 150 fish a year throughout the entire state greater than 8 pounds. And I'm familiar with that number because those fish are so rare and so special. Every single one of those fish that we electrofish greater than 8 pounds, we put one of those reward tags in. Because
really?
We want to know, it gives us actually quite a bit of information about the status of those trophy fish, how frequently they're caught, how frequently they're harvested, the percentage of those fish that are going into the Trophy Catch program.
Kind of like a little mark recapture type study.
Yeah, it's a monitoring program to help us monitor the status of trophy bass fisheries across Florida, and also our program, like how successful our program is, what awareness is, and what participation rates are like in the program.
Right on. Well, that brings me to largemouth bass diet trial. What is that about?
Yeah, so this is part of an initiative that we have called the Florida Trophy Bass Project. And the Florida Trophy Bass Project is aimed at doing more intensive management to try and grow more of those 15 plus pound fish. You know, in Florida, we have a lot of lakes. We have Florida bass, so we have the right genetics to grow big fish. And we grow a lot of big fish in Florida, 10 to 13 plus pounds, but a 15-pound bass in Florida, or really anywhere, is very, very rare. And historically, the FWC hasn't really done hyper-focused, intensive management specifically for those top-end.
Mm-hmm.
And so over the last few years, we've really been focusing in on that more. Now, we can't go out and like hyper intensively manage Lake Okeechobee. And Lake Okeechobee wouldn't be a great spot to pick anyway to grow a 15-pound bass. But, you know, where we can, opportunistically, there are some things that we can do, even at a statewide level, to improve trophy fish production. And a lot of this is informed by research. And so one of those research projects was this diet trial. And what we wanted to know, you know, forage augmentation, or really forage availability and forage augmentation, are critical for trophy bass management and trophy fish production. I mean, you know, you are what you eat, right? So you gotta have a good forage base. And so we were curious, what would the relative weight gain be for bass that were fed super intensively on different prey items that are common in Florida, or that could be used to augment forage populations. And so at Webster, at our Rich Loam fish hatchery, we got several wild Florida bass that we held in tanks there over a 3-month period and fed them a very intensive diet of different prey items to look at their weight gain and evaluate what the best forage item might be. And then we also did, in partnership with University of Florida, a calorimetry study looking at the caloric content of an even greater number of forage species. And we were limited in how many forage species we could look at the hatchery, because there's only so many raceways to keep fish, and we need to have replicates for our treatments. So we've only been able to look at a few species, and we've looked at bluegill, lake chub suckers. Those are our native and known important forage items. And then rainbow trout, which, you know, California made famous growing big bass on rainbow trout.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe some people think it's a little bit crazy. Some people think it's maybe a little bit innovative to do some rainbow trout plantings in Florida. And so we've been doing some research to see if it's more on the crazy or genius side.
Right.
And then the other species we looked at was koi. And koi are a non-native, and they can't be used for pond management in Florida or stocked in Florida because they're a non-native. But we do use them at our fish hatchery. We breed them at our fish hatchery, and they are the primary forage that we feed our brood fish at the fish hatchery. So we were interested in evaluating those because we do use them at our fish hatchery as our forage. And it turns out that they are very nutritious. Rainbow trout had the highest calorie content of all the forage that we looked at. And we evaluated, I think, 15 different species, pretty much everything that you could think of. And then in the actual feed trial, we had good results on some individual fish from every treatment group,
Mm-hmm.
but koi and trout were the two best on average across the treatment groups. And this is kind of wild, but we were able to put over 3 pounds of weight on an individual fish in 3 months, and we
Yeah.
did it on bluegill. That
On
individual was fed bluegills.
Yeah.
The highest individual weight gain.
I'm not surprised. I've seen a lot of fish grow really good just on straight bluegill. I just made a post about that the other day, telling most pond owners not to fall down that kind of rabbit hole of stocking forage unless you're a guy like you and who's done research and knows exactly how to do it. A lot of times you're just kind of just spending your money for no measurable difference in relative weight change, but I definitely noticed that. I've stocked trout before in ponds. We just stocked one up last year that had some trout stocking, and that puts weight on bass for sure. You'll get some big bass off trout. You'll also lose some of your other forage base, your thread fins or your bluegill to the trout. You need supplemental stock behind that. But no, that's all really interesting, really cool. Ron has a question here, kind of going back to the fish handling. What we were talking about. Is there a certain time of year where the bass are more likely to die from being handled and caught? And any thoughts on post-spawn fish dying more than pre-spawn, or any ideas about that?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I have some interesting information on that. So summertime, warm water temperatures are definitely a key variable that influence both initial and delayed mortality, but delayed mortality is more common than initial. As that water temperature increases, and especially the summertime, that's when you're much more likely to have a fish die from handling and being caught or held in a live well. And the second part of that question, we've done some interesting research, some telemetry studies where we've looked at fish throughout a year and determined their natural mortality rates on an annual cycle. And then we get an inference about when that natural mortality occurs. And almost all of the natural mortality occurs in that post-spawn period and going into summer. So that spawn is such a stressful time for that fish. And then coming out of that spawn, that post-spawn period, going into summer with the warm water temperatures, almost all of the natural mortality occurs during that time period after that spawn.
Mm-hmm. I've seen that before in ponds. Sometimes you just go out and for whatever reason, all the big fish are dead post-spawn, like right after they just kick. And it's a weird thing that happens, but it just happens. And it's not like they were unhealthy or anything. Just it happens sometimes.
Yep. And a lot of people, including myself, I've been blown away with seeing the dramatic changes in weight that can occur in a pretty short amount of time, both upwards and downwards. Pre versus post spawn, or just forage conditions, things just lining up right. We had an example on Orange Lake where we tagged a bass, so it had a unique tag in it with a tag number. We knew exactly what this fish was. It was part of our statewide tagging study that I talked about earlier for all fish greater than 8 pounds. We recaught that same exact fish 6 months later, had the same tag in it. It had grown from a little under 10 pounds to a little over 13 pounds in 6 months.
Holy cow.
On the opposite side.
Crushing much? Jeez, Pete.
Well, they're growing special on orange.
Oh, yeah.
Orange is special right now.
Yeah, that kind of a new lake effect over there. It was drained, right, due to drought?
Yep. It was orange. Orange is one of the few large lakes that we have remaining in Florida that still has fairly natural hydrological cycles that experience those droughts and floods and those huge water level fluctuations, which people may not realize how important those are to our systems, and that's how they operated, back in the 1700s when everything was wild. These lakes, and they would get low, they would burn, all the sediments would harden and desiccate, and it was just like resetting the clock, and you would get these new reservoir effects. And We don't get those on a lot of our natural lakes now that are stabilized and have water levels managed. But
Yeah.
Orange Lake, we still get that.
Yeah.
When Orange, the sinkhole opens up during drought periods and it goes dry, and it's a big bummer when that happens because that lake's down and out.
Right.
Maybe for a few years, but then when it refills back up, it is special. And we call it a trophy bass window right now. And we're in one of those trophy bass windows on Orange Lake.
I see. Well, I've certainly have seen. I'm not far from there. It's just west of me, and I have heard and seen some big bass coming out of that place, man. And I went over there one day. The hydrilla over there is amazing, just an ocean of it. But I need to work on how to better find the holes at Orange for sure. Try to get one of those fish while they're there.
You have to put in your time there.
Yeah.
I live close by. I'm in Gainesville, and I don't fish it as much as I should because I struggle when I go out there. I know they live there,
right?
Got them, but it's not easy.
So, what are the numbers like if we've like Rodman Reservoir out here? If I've got 10,000 acres at Rodman, am I fishing for a trophy bass in 10 acres of water? Is there a trophy bass in 100 acres of water? Do you have numbers like that? Do you have a?
Yeah, you're closer to per 10 acres or even less than
really
to the 100 acres. Yeah, so we've done some studies where we've actually estimated the population size of trophy bass in some moderate sized lakes, and that one every 10 acres is not a bad number for where we've looked at it. I think you can do even a little bit better than that
really
in some cases.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's really amazing.
And your backyard there in Rodman is the number one lake throughout the entire history of the trophy catch program.
Is that right?
Yeah, 13 years and over 15,000 catches. Rodman has the most submissions into the program.
Well, geez, I sure hate hearing that. It's a beautiful place back there. I enjoy fishing it. But like you said, it's incredibly difficult. I'm either a hero or a zero back there. I'm either catching or 0-0 and nothing in between.
Get you some golden shiners.
Yep. It gets a lot of pressure with the shiners. I think sometimes you can look out and just see nothing but guide boats out there, with guide trips and in that live bait type pressure. But I don't know. I've enjoyed it. It is difficult, but if it wasn't, it wouldn't be any fun, right? Can't be all easy all the time. Let's see what Josh has got for me here. He's got a question. The Fishing Regulation Magazine.
Yeah, so the difference between share lunker program and trophy catch program. So in Texas, the share lunker program, which predates our trophy catch program by quite a few years. Share lunker was started in 1986 out in Texas. And that was shortly after Florida bass had been introduced into Texas, and they were first seeing some of their big fish. Before Florida bass were brought to Texas, the state record was 13 pounds or less.
Okay.
Lake Fork was created. Florida bass were brought to Texas and put in many lakes, and Lake Fork was growing them. They were 17, and I think the state and lake record is over 18 pounds. The very first entry into the share lunker program, caught from Lake Fork, was a state record, and that fish went on to the Bass Pro Shops headquarters in Missouri and lived out her days famously there. She grew to over 20 pounds and had like a funeral ceremony when she died with, I think, over 1,000 people that had attended. I think she was named Ethel. And so that very first fish becoming a state record just put that program, catapulted it into success and popularity. And the thing about the share lunker program is it was to encourage not to harvest that fish. Remember, this is 1986 when that started, and to release it, but also before releasing it, give it to Texas Parks and Wildlife so that they could spawn that fish. They would spawn that fish, and then those offspring would be stocked back out to try and keep those Florida bass alleles high in these populations.
Sure.
So that's the premise behind the share lunker program, which is a great program and has been wildly successful. The key difference with trophy catch is that we want you to immediately release those fish.
Right.
And we want you to immediately release those fish because we know that almost all of our populations are naturally pure Florida, and that fish is going to have a better chance at successfully spawning if you immediately release it back into the wild than if we bring it to the hatchery. It deals with all that stress at the hatchery, and then the offspring, go through some habituation, being in a hatchery setting where their life skills may not be as good as if they were spawned in the wild. So we have the advantage here that we don't need to bring those fish to the hatchery to spawn them to get those Florida bass genes back out into the wild.
That makes complete sense, and really highlights what we touched on earlier on our pet peeve portion of the program, safe fish handling, and how we can better improve that. And I'll keep beating that, sticking a dead horse at this point with it. But it's like you said, it's such an area where I think we can improve a lot. And it's an area that if we can get guys to listen and improve a lot, I think we're going to see significant results from that improval very quickly.
Agreed. Yeah, it's definitely an area that we really could make some improvements, and I think notable improvements that we could see results from.
Yeah, I agree, and hopefully we can get more people to listen. And I've noticed too, I've gotten a lot of traction from like the professional type guys, more name fishermen. They're starting to, get more involved in like fisheries management and listening to this kind of stuff. And I'm seeing their content. And I think that's important to have. It needs to be the same for everyone across all places, not the most popular guys boat flipping and doing what they want to do, and then the rest of us over here trying to teach the right way to do it. That's not going to work. We need some consistency across all the platforms, and hopefully once these guys kind of figure out what's going on and that's not contributing to growing trophy fish, and those types of things are really important to growing trophy fish. Like from my perspective, from a private lake or private pond perspective, if somebody built that pond or that small lake just to grow bass, do you know how much each fish is worth? When you break down a couple $100,000 to build a lake just to stock a few hundred bass, those fish are extremely valuable. No, you're not going to be boat flipping them. No, you're not going to be dragging them through the grass. Absolutely not. You're not going to be doing any of those things. You're not going to be jacking them by the jaw and flinging them around and hugging and kissing and not paying attention to the fish while they flop around on the deck of the boat. None of those things are happening on private water where people, are paying really good money to grow those bass. And I don't want to make it sound like that, because I think these Florida fish in public water need to be treated exactly the same way, even though they're technically free or everyone's fish. They don't deserve to be boat flipped or treated poorly either. They need to be handled properly so we have them for future generations. That's the entire idea of releasing the fish, is releasing it back in a healthy condition.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to keep it and make it fish tacos. I don't care about that either, but if we're going to be releasing it.
I'm glad you said that, because I was going to bring it up, because I am by no means advocating for don't keep a bass. In fact, I think the pendulum has swung way too far on the we're going to catch and release everything after we boat flip it and drag it around in a live well all day.
Right.
We keep the biggest ones. But I would like to see a lot more harvest of smaller fish. In fact, we've revamped our regulations statewide more aimed at trophy bass management, where we're encouraging the harvest of smaller fish. So we don't have any minimum size limit for our statewide regulation. We have some individual water bodies that have specialized regulations that might be catch and release only. So you do need to pay attention, but the vast majority of the lakes across Florida are under a statewide harvest regulation that is a 16-inch maximum with 1 over per day.
Yeah.
You could keep 5 fish less than 16 inches, as small as 6 inches if you wanted to.
Right.
Or, 4 under 16 and 1 over. But because that regulation exists, that means you can't put your 5 biggest that are all over 16 inches in your live well.
In your live well, right. You can have 1, and then that's right. After that, it would be violation, wouldn't it?
Yep.
Good. That's excellent. And I agree. I mean, in pond management, I would tell people all the time, those 1 pound bass, you really need to harvest those pretty heavy, and I couldn't get any cooperation with that for years, for decades. People just, that catch and release is beat into everybody's head to the point where they just won't harvest fish at all anymore. And I've used those signs actually on my page to show people, like, look, if you look at what this sign, look at what they're telling you with the sign. They want you keeping these fish under 16 inches. Like, you can keep 5 of them under 16 inches.
Well, here's, think about it this way. If you're trying to manage a pond, or for us, we're trying to manage 8,000 lakes across the state, roughly half of our fish are males. So that means roughly half of our fish are really never going to get over 5 pounds. I mean, even a 5 pound male is very rare. And so, half of our fish, their maximum potential is 5, maybe 6 pounds, but more commonly probably 3 or 4 pounds.
Right.
And so, if you're focusing all of your harvest on those fish that are less than 16 inches, you're selectively harvesting more males.
Right.
Than you are females.
Yeah. That's a great way to put that. I never really thought about it that way, but I'm definitely going to steal that from you. You've at least got a 50-50 chance of it being a male at that point. And then at, what would you say, that 22 probably inch mark, those are probably all females and up.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Maybe even 21. I don't know. 7, like you said, 6-7 pounds is about all. I've never seen a male bass even over 5 pounds, really.
Yeah, I mean, that's like in the same rarefied air as when we were talking about 10 to 13 pound largemouth bass.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. That's an interesting way to put it. All right, I'm going to double check with Instagram real quick. I didn't click back there. Might have a question floating back there that we missed. I don't want to miss anybody's stuff.
While you're checking that, one other question I never answered was biggest bass that I've ever shocked, and I'm gonna tie that in with another myth I'll try and bust.
All right.
I can't tell you how many times I've heard when I'm out at a ramp and nobody knows I'm with FWC and I'm just talking to an angler. In fact, I've heard it at Rodman before. Oh, the FWC biologist shocked a state record out here just last week. That's as common as there's catfish at the bottom of this dam the size of a Volkswagen.
Yep.
It's just one of those myths you hear all the time. And, the biggest bass that I've ever shocked is 13 pounds. And the biggest one that I know of anyone with the FWC that's ever shocked was 16 pounds. So, we've never shocked a state record anywhere before. I mean, those fish are just so rare.
Where was that 16 pounder picked up at?
That was in the Little Manatee River.
Was it?
Yep.
Wow.
It's feeds in Tampa Bay.
Yeah.
Seems like an unlikely spot. It was actually for a University of Florida master's project looking at minimum flow and level requirements for spotted sunfish. So it wasn't even a bass project.
Right, of course not. Why would it be?
But I mean, it's got marine influence. So there's mullet and crabs and other.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So you start thinking about it, it's like, oh, okay. But I mean, that was just like kind of a freak thing.
That's amazing. Josh has got a question. Do you know of an accurate way of field identifying males to females yet?
So, well, one way is just size differentiation. If you catch one over 6 pounds, it's almost certainly a female. In the springtime, in Florida, we have a very protracted spawning season. I mean, we have spawning going on in Florida from maybe late October, early November, all the way into probably late April, depending on what part of the state you're in and what our weather patterns are. But during that period, you can tell with just an inflamed and reddish colored vent that's most likely a female. You can also squeeze on the belly, and if they're really ripe, you can get some milk or some eggs that'll tell you if it's male or female. We use, like, for going to the hatchery and we need to know if it's a female, we'll use a catheter. That's not something a common angler is probably going to be carrying around and cathetering fish to try and get eggs, but that's one of the ways that we use.
That's probably the best way, huh?
Yeah, that would be the most definitive way to determine.
Yeah.
Or if you do decide to harvest a mess when you fillet them,
you'll know it then. That's what I say. The old fillet and release technique will tell you every single time. Yeah, I find it really interesting that like all of the y'all have like the standard harvest for like everywhere is the same. It doesn't differentiate that much.
Yeah, I mean, we have a few select water bodies like Fellsmere, which is a new reservoir down the headwaters of the St. Johns River. That's catch and release only.
Right.
The Stick Marsh has been that way since the 90s. Orange Lake, we just changed the regulations to a very unique regulation. We put a 20-inch hard maximum size limit on Orange Lake. So it's not legal to possess or harvest anything greater than 20 inches on Orange Lake.
Yeah.
That's very intentional because, like I said earlier, we're in one of those trophy bass windows.
Right.
These windows are only open for a few years.
Right.
Because I think a lot of anglers are really interested in age, and I'm, age and growth. I'm certainly interested in it as a biologist. And so, an average Florida bass max age is like 10.
Okay.
And also the average age of a 10-pound bass in Florida is 10. So the max age on average is about 10 years and 10 pounds. And that's on average about a pound of growth a year.
Right.
And that's based on over 1,000 fish that we collected from taxidermies. But when you start looking at the range, it gets pretty interesting. So the range of those 10-pound fish was 4 years old to 16 years old. So it can be quite variable. Growth rates can change a lot depending on the productivity of the system, forage, etc. But Florida, we have the advantage of growing big fish because we have the genetics that California, Texas, Mississippi, some of these places that have grown real giants, Japan, they didn't have those genetics naturally. But now they have those genetics, and now they have some advantages over Florida that are key. So now they have our genetics, but they have deeper lakes than we do. So there is more thermal relief in the summertime, less stress. Fish can live longer. In Florida, the oldest bass that we've ever aged is 16 years old. And on average, 10, 12 years old is like your max for most populations. That's not very old compared to, I think Dottie, the famous fish that was once caught at 25 pounds out in California, when she died, I think was 18 years old. So, and I know fish in Texas can get to 18 years old in some of those deep reservoirs. So you got longevity is key. You want to get real big, you're going to have to live a long time.
Right.
And so we're at a pretty big disadvantage here in Florida because the number of years we have to get to 15 plus pounds is less than the number of years than some other places have.
Right. Now I was at I was over at Silver Springs, and I overheard one of the kayak guides talking about the blue tilapia biomass in the Silver River was like 85%. And I was like, wow, I wonder if is he accurate with the competing species biomass number there? Is he pulling numbers out of his tail? And what are you guys seeing as far as, non-native competition around the state, and what problems are you having with that?
Well, my guess is that number was not informed by data that he gave you.
Okay.
But there can be incredibly high densities of tilapia in some of our systems, and really non-native fish in general, and that gets more pronounced the further south that you go.
Sure.
Down in South Florida, there are canal systems that have more non-native species than native species of fish. Tilapia have thermal tolerances that are a little bit greater than some of the other non-native fish down there. So they've expanded wider. I mean, we have tilapia populations all the way out in the Western Panhandle.
Mm-hmm.
What their effects are on bass populations is not fully understood at this time. We have some ongoing research right now where we're doing some controlled experiments in ponds with different densities of tilapia and looking at the effect on bass recruitment. Because that's one of the hypotheses, is that, their spawning season overlaps. They're both nest builders and, similar habitat types. And so could there be some interspecific competition going on between bass and tilapia? It's plausible, but we don't know. And so that's one of the things that we're looking at. So I don't have results on that study yet that I can share because that one's ongoing.
That's pretty cool information, though. I'll be looking forward to hearing about that. All this stuff is available at myfwc.com is what I'm looking at, and there's just article after article and all these projects that I described. The Florida Trophy Bass projects are all listed on there. You can read about all that stuff there. The Florida Trophy Catch is definitely a page you guys should check out and register for, especially if you're going to be fishing around in Florida, so you can get in all the cool prizes.
And Trophy Catch has a brand new website. We just overhauled our website, and something that anglers have wanted for a long time, and we knew that it was a deterrent for some for participation, is I don't want to tell you what lake I caught my fish at. And because a lot of anglers go on there and they want to see what's the hot lake, where are the fish being caught, and then they might go fish that lake. So we know for some it might have been a barrier to participation. So our new website, you can select to hide your water body from the public location. You still need to tell us because we still need that data.
Right.
And so, that's protected in our database, but the public facing website, your information will be hidden. And so that's a cool new feature that maybe if you were hesitant about participating because you didn't want people knowing you caught your big fish from Orange Lake, you can just say Alachua County.
There you go. Well, that's good. And anybody, I'll tell you, that can fish at Rodman, come out there. I don't care. Come holler at me. We'll fish together. Maybe we can hold a 10-pound fish up. That would be great. All right. Maybe Josh has got a question here. Oh, wait, no, we can answer this question. All right. And let me scroll back. Make sure we didn't miss anybody. I sure appreciate you coming on and taking your time with us today, Jason.
Absolutely. Enjoyed it.
I want to have you gotten with Alex? Have you talked to anybody else about expanding your information on socials? I can put your name around to some other guys that I know if you want to go on to some bigger places and get the word out to more fishermen. We can definitely help you there.
Sure. No, I haven't. Well, I did. I've done a couple of episodes of Bass After Dark. With.
Oh, good. Yeah, that's a good program. I enjoy that.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Yeah, right on.
Yeah.
Well, I don't have anything else, and I don't see any other questions. And it's been about an hour, and I think that's a good time to kind of wrap it up, so we don't keep people too long. If we go for too long, the viewership kind of falls off.
Yeah. No, this was great. Enjoyed it.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. I really do. And I'll have you back on in a little while and get some more information on all these research projects. This is great information. I appreciate it.
Yeah. I mean, as much as we covered, we could do lots more shows.
Oh, I know, right?
We've got some really talented biologists in our group too. That would be great guests as well to take deeper dives. Like you didn't get into non-lethal aging, and we've got a biologist working on that project, and it'd be great to get her on. I think you met her, Summer Lindeland.
Summer, yeah. She was talking about shocking a big fish up at Rodman. I wanted to talk to her about that on here and all the stuff she has going. Definitely, I'll be in touch with her.
Sounds good.
All right, awesome. I appreciate it, Jason. Thanks again.
Yeah,
man.
Absolutely.
All right, thanks, you guys. We're going to wrap it up here. We'll see you next week.